as we can see with the text that we are given, we are to modify something that we have already created. We created a script in task 4 and now we need to modify it as described here. And if we look a little bit at what it says that we shall have a menu with 5 options, and then it lists the different options and then lists them again and describes them. So I think what I will do is that I will mark each of the option here, because we need to handle all of them, and everything that is mentioned about them is important. So if I just mark them here, then I can look up what each of them shall do. So for example, if we take a look at new word list, create a new empty dictionary and store it in a file. Right, that's one of the options. And then if we can look at all of them. Load the word list, loads a previously created word list from a file. Right, we know what that one should do. Add a new word, adds a new word to the already created word list and stores the dictionary to the file. Right, so here it's two things. We add a new word and then we store it to a file. Similar to what we did in the first one here, where we created an empty one and then store it to a file. And just to stop here for one short second, if we see something like this where it is kind of the same thing we are doing, that is probably a function that we can create that does this for us, so we don't duplicate the code. But let's continue here. Practice, that's one of the options. And here we can see that, all right, this shall be pretty much what we had in the previous script that we solved, that checks all the words. And the last option is just to quit the script. So with all this, we can start to think about how to solve it. But I think before we start solving it, we must make sure that we understand it. So that's the first step here, to understand it. But I think we have a pretty good understanding of what we need to do. We need to transform our old script into having this menu that can do these things. And you can see here on the right hand side that I have brought in the plan that we had for the previous task, and maybe we can reuse some parts of it. For example, we saw here that one of the options, called practice, it should be similar to what we had before. So I imagine that it will be exactly the same or very similar to our play function that we had before. And we also saw here that we should load the previously created word list from a file. It's not the same as we did, but maybe we can modify this function that we had, populate dictionary. Of course, the main function will be completely different, so I'll just delete it here. But what I will do is that I will keep those two functions here for now, and then I'll start with a new main function. And we can see here that I'll start drawing it and then we can talk about it a little bit. And here is my beginning of the main function. We can see that, all right, what shall we do in the main function? I will have a loop that will continue running as long as we want it to keep running, meaning that we don't use the exit option in the menu. But if we do, we're finished. Then the script should just exit. But if we want to keep running, I want to call a function. We haven't added it yet, but imagine that we can have a function that displays the menu on the screen. So we will display the menu and we will read the user choice. So they can select something from the menu. And what should happen after this? Okay, so let's take a look here. All right, we read the user's choice, and if that the option is not 1, then we will go in true here. But if this evaluates to false, it means that we have selected option 1. And what do we do then? We create a new dictionary and save that dictionary. How do we know that we should do this for the first option? Well, if we look here on the left, we can see that we should create a new empty dictionary and store it to a file. We will continue drawing lines down here, but let's see if we can add what should happen if the user selects option number 2. Right, so we imagine that the user wants to press option number 2. Option is not 1, that's true. Option is not 2, that's false because it is 2. So what would we do then? Then we would load the word list as we see here on the left. But I imagine that we can reuse the function that we had before called populate dictionary. It's just that we rewrite that function. And let me add options 3 and maybe 4 too at the same time. And we can see here if option is not 1, not 2, but it is 3, what should we do? Well, that is the option for adding a new word. So then what we need to do is input the Swedish and the English word, add them to the dictionary, and then also save the dictionary. And as we talked about before, this is probably going to use the same function as we used for this other option here. We saw that in 1 here we are also storing it to a file. Option 4, that is the practice option. What we can do here is probably, as we said before, reuse the function that we created before called play. But if it isn't 1, 2, 3, or 4, there is only one option left, and that is to exit the program. And what we do then is say that keep running is false. I'll finish it up by adding the other arrows here, so we go back in the loop and also add true and false. All right, I think we have finished the main function. So let's go over it again because it's starting to get big here. So, alright, in the main function we shall have a loop that just keeps running until we select that it should end in the exit option, which is one of the 5 options that we have. If we do want to exit, we will just end the script here, so there is nothing more that should happen in the main function after that. But let's imagine that we don't choose that, so what would happen in the loop? Well, we would display the menu, then we would read the user's choice, and if the option is 1, so we imagine that it is 1, then this would be false. Option is not 1. No, but we just said it is 1, meaning that this would be false. Then we would go here and create a new dictionary and save it, which corresponds to what it says that it should do here. After that, we go back in the menu, go back in the loop, display the menu, read a new choice. Alright, if it is 2, then it's not 1, and this one would be false, meaning that we would populate the dictionary. And in my world, that is that we should load it from file. And it keeps going here. If the option is 3, what would we do? Then we would input the Swedish and the English word, add it to the dictionary, and save it to, and call the function save dictionary. So we would see here when we add a new word, right, adds a new word to the already created word list and stores the dictionary in the file. So it's the things that we have mentioned here. For the last option that is not exit, called practice here, what we should do is call our old play function. And then if it's not 1, 2, 3 or 4, then it must be 5, which is the exit one. We just set it to be false. That keep running should be false. And the next time we come up here, we shouldn't keep running, and we have finished. So here we have the main function. Now let's see, because we are still missing a few functions that we have mentioned here. For example, play, save dictionary, populate dictionary, and display menu. So we need to add those two. And let's see what we can use over here. I think this play function will stay the same, but we need to change this one, populate. So let me think about how we should change that, and then we can talk about it. And populate dictionary is loading it from a file. So I imagine that we need to open the file, read the word list from the file, and we can see here we should use pickling, and after that we must close the file and of course return that word list that we read from the file. But here we have the populate dictionary. Let's see, we need to be able to save our word list to a file. So we had one function called save dictionary. Let's see if we can add that one here next to populate dictionary. And I imagine that this is how this function should work. It's very similar to the one we just talked about. The only difference is that after we have opened the file, we dump the word list to the file, and then we close the file. So that is very similar. It's just one reads and one saves. We have one more function here that we need to add, and that is one that displays the menu. And this one is pretty straightforward. We can see that there is only one thing that we wanted to do, and that is to print the menu on the screen. So let's see here. We have display menu, we have save and load, and we also have our play function, and we have our very big main function. I will color them a little bit and maybe rearrange them a little on the page. And I think there we are done. We have colored the main function here, so we can see that this is one function. We have also colored the other functions so we can easily separate them, and I moved them to save a little bit of space. But here we have our plan, and as we can see, it looks quite complicated, and we will see how it actually looks when we implement it. But we can start to see the downside of using flowcharts here. If the program has many options, for example, as we can see here, we have a menu. Even if it's easy to follow it step by step, just looking at it quickly, it might look very complicated. And if we have many functions, which we also have in this example here, we can see that, all right, it takes up a lot of space for us. So maybe easier to print it and have it next to us instead of having it on the screen when we're implementing the script later on. But with that, I think we're done with our plan, and in the next video we will try to implement this.